It's the first week of June in 2023, and a lot of contractors have been saying that it has been tougher this spring selling projects for this coming season. We kind of saw that coming, but we didn't necessarily know how challenging it was going to be. So if you find yourself getting beat up on price a little too often, or putting a lot of work in, meeting the clients, designing the projects, presenting them, submitting quotes, and then losing those jobs at the finish line, you're going to want to check out this week's episode because we're talking about sales process. And that is one of the best ways that you can differentiate your business and add value to your customer. It is with a solid sales process that takes into consideration the position of both the buyer and the seller to create the best experience and add the most value for both parties involved so that the right buying decision gets made. That's what we're going to talk about with an expert this week. His name is Jeff from Groundwork, and he is so passionate about sales and sales processes for the tradespeople in our industry that he's developed a process and software called Groundwork that is made specifically to make you look like a superstar professional who knows how to run sales calls and improve your closing rates. So if this sounds interesting to you, make sure to check out this week's episode with Jeff from Groundwork. Let's get into the show. You're listening to Hardscape Growth, a podcast for hungry professionals who want to grow their businesses and level up. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Hardscape Growth Show. Today, I'm very excited because we are joined by Jeff Wraley from Groundwork. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about sales process. And most importantly, in keeping with our theme for this season of the Hardscape High Five, we're going to talk about how all that great stuff adds value to your clients, your prospective clients, your team, yourself, and your business. There's a lot of ways this can contribute great things to your company and make your life easier. So let's get started right away. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is, what is Groundwork? If I read what it says on the website, it's a lead conversion system for home improvement contractors who want to win the right leads for their business. Sounds great. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so functionally, we use video and other kind of digital means of collaboration to help contractors get a good view of a project before they run across town to do a sales appointment. So there's a bit of kind of like pre-qualification there, but we also really have built up the system to be a collaboration tool. So virtual has kind of a weird connotation these days, but the reality is that contractors save a lot of time and money when they collaborate virtually with prospective customers, and homeowners and clients want to do that kind of virtual collaboration first. Obviously, at some point, you're going to want to go take a look at things in person, but our tool really helps that kind of digital conversation to happen in a substantive way so that in-person consultation, if that's a needed part of the process, can be more effective. You kind of start on third base, rounding towards home.
By the time you get out there.
Yeah, by the time you get out there, you got good, warm conversation going.
So saving time, making things more efficient, and helping you close the deals that make the most sense for your business. Less tire kickers, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we see, that the classic drive around and do sales appointments all day. That makes sense for some businesses, but more and more we're reimagining that whole process. With the backdrop of 10 plus years of people having phones and in their pockets that are very powerful, and people being more and more interested in collaborating virtually as opposed to in person.
Cool. Why do you do what you do? What made you start this, and why is it so important?
Yeah, I mean, I love the intersection of kind of creativity in business. I mean, that's why it resonates so much with hardscape business owners, because there's so much creativity in that process of putting a new outdoor living space together. I've been in the trades myself, from mowing lawns and doing small landscaping jobs in high school. Was in commercial contracting, saw a ton of innovation hit that kind of sector of the contracting industry. And my wife's a designer, so we've renovated homes and I like to say I've hired almost every type of contractor that you can hire. There's probably a good chunk that I haven't, but I love the thought of kind of equipping hardworking trades business owners with tech. Like there's no reason that the experience of working with a contractor shouldn't be on par with the brands that everybody knows and love for the experience that they provide. The Apples, the Amazons, those types of players. So that's a bit of our mission, is just give contractors the tools to kind of elevate themselves and to really change the way that they approach the market and service their clients.
I think what's interesting with what you just said, though, is the fact that you've hired nearly every trade at some point throughout your career or your personal life. You're in a position where you see what good and bad sales processes look like, and you can probably speak to what that, when it's good, what that means, and when it's bad, what that means, and why there's a difference between the two. So why don't we start with the main difference between good and bad? And I feel that our first talking point here, which is a sales process, was probably a big part of that.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to it. One, there's kind of the very, very old school way of doing things that, maybe there is a process, but it's just not a very good one. Talking to some of my experience, we needed a couple new windows as we added some space onto our house outside of Indianapolis here. And I had a window salesperson come out, which if you've ever been in that seat of buying that type of service, there's some of the maybe most aggressive, old school sales tactics there. And it's a process, but I would argue not a very good one.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So, I mean,
because you're in the new school whole sales process world. That is your whole business. So what does that mean, the old school way of doing things?
The old school is, very much, hey, I'm going to come, I've got my bag of goods. I'm going to, show you the thing that I want to sell you. For the salesperson, it's likely the highest margin product they've got, regardless of whether that's what I need or want. Show you the benefits, do some, stomp on the window trick, put it on the ground and stomp on it. Look how strong it is. I don't care if I can stomp on my windows.
Okay.
Turns out that's not something I do on the daily. So just kind of that old pitchiness. I think that's, comes from like kind of the old school marketing stuff, 50s, 60s, where it was just selling on, features. Like, hey, we've got
infomercial stuff.
Yeah, the infomercial stuff, right? Like, here's the greatest, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. That is just the way that people consume information now. They can figure that stuff out for themselves most times, right? So that old school sales process is, kind of assumes that the salesperson is the bearer of all news to that homeowner.
Okay.
But that's not the case anymore. So that pitchiness, the lack of attention to the homeowner's actual needs is, I think, the old school way of doing things. Not to mention the process of getting there and that in-person time, which is valuable in the right step of the process. I think that's a hallmark of the old school thing of like, hey, we're going to get there, we're going to sell them.
So get the call, head out there, pull out the props, put on the show.
Song and dance.
Yeah. And what are the problems with that? Because you're talking about them as if like there's bad things. I understand why we're having this conversation, but like what's wrong with that inherently? What are the problems?
Yeah, I think industry-wide close rates are, depending on who you talk to and like a little bit of different trades, anywhere from the 30 to 40%, I think is probably a pretty good number. Obviously larger projects sway that number a little bit. Smaller things are a little easier to sell. But there's just time involved in that process. So I'd say there's probably two things that I'd point out, like the problems. One is from the time involved from the contractor's perspective. That motion, that sales motion, just takes a lot of time. And so there's obviously costs involved in that. If you're only closing 30%, you have some overhead capture, right? That's sales expense. I talk about sales efficiency. How much effort, time, money does it take for you to sell, call it $100,000 of projects? That model doesn't create efficiency when it comes to that type of a metric. So that's one thing. The other thing is kind of what I touched on earlier, is just the experience. The modern homeowner doesn't necessarily resonate with that type of sales process. And you might say, hey, the older, a little bit more older customers, maybe they do still want to purchase things like that and want to have those types of conversations.
Because it's how they purchase things forever?
Yeah, maybe that's how they're doing it. But I think if you look at the future and you talk to younger homeowners and, start to look at the way things are going, that strategy is, the effectiveness of that strategy is dwindling.
Because today's consumers more informed than in the past, just because of how easy it is to access information on products and contractors and how things should be built?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. That's certainly part of it in terms of like how they've likely researched things up into the point where you might have that song and dance type of situation.
Yeah.
But the buying pattern also doesn't match the buying pattern that they have for almost everything else in their entire life. So the buying pattern for most other things, from toilet paper from Amazon to just kind of shopping at the store, to even more considered purchases like a vehicle, it's a very different process. So I liken it to the car industry. Actually has some interesting analogies, but the going to buy a car, used car salesman, like that's a typical, like you say used car salesman, to most people that means that means I'm going to be there for 6 hours while they do this paperwork.
I'm not going to enjoy this. I just want to get the car and get out of there, but I know I have to deal with this pain to get what I want, basically.
That's right. And there's been a ton of disruption in that space of what that buying process looks like. And I think that the trade's probably behind where that industry is from that perspective, but that shift is coming.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about, I think it's very interesting because I asked the question about sales process and you responded with buying process. So let's drill into that a little bit. I think, putting yourself in the customer's perspective is probably the best way to bring them value, because you're doing things for them. And if they like you more than the other guy, it's probably because you're serving their needs more. And then I suspect, at least in my personal experience, if I do a better job of satisfying your needs, price is less of a discussion point than you feeling like you're going to get your money's worth. And I think that's the biggest concern that homeowners have with these types of investments. Am I wrong there?
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, budget is a whole other discussion point. Maybe we can dive into that.
Yeah, we'll get to budget after, but yeah. Let's start with the buying process versus sales process and what that really means in terms of mapping it out.
Yeah, whether we like it or not, the weight has shifted a bit to the buyer's way of doing things, rather than the way that someone might want to sell. Right? It's the old adage, or at least maybe a little bit more recent. People don't want to be sold, but they're okay buying it. That's they want to buy, they don't want to be sold. So I think really ingraining that into the process that a contractor has in their business is going to pay dividends. People want to feel like they're in the driver's seat, and we've got a sales coach for our team, and one of the things he mentions is the illusion of control, which is maybe a little bit seedy, maybe a little bit way of putting it. It makes you feel not so great, but I think there's something there, right? Like you want to get them to lean in, and they want, if you get them to be the buyer as opposed to you to be the seller, that balance of power usually works out for the better. You have to be okay with, things maybe not working out the exact way you want them to, because they are the buyer. And if they don't want to buy, the hard sales stuff, you haven't done your work on the front end to make them an interested buyer, in my opinion. So I think that, like, lean forward from the customer's perspective, getting that lean forward is very, very important. And honestly, for the beautiful, high end, those like very emotionally tied in, like family spaces that a lot of contractors build, it's a really cool way to like use social media and some other aspects of the marketing funnel to lean into the sales funnel that gets people to say, I want to work with this person. And then creating a smooth process after that, I think is the trick.
So what is that process, or what are the steps to building that process, or the steps in that process? What's a practical takeaway for our listeners here?
Yeah. So I think the, a couple of notes I had is just making it easy for them, right? The phone conversation, customers that we talk to, that's still a big part of the way that they manage their lead flow. Some people lean into, a little bit more digital strategy than phone calls, but either way, creating a process that is a quick feedback loop is very, very important. So if you have them leaning forward, you want to keep that momentum going. So simple tools like aligning your website and your Google My Business page and all those types of like entry points into the sales funnel, keeping that interaction aligned in a way that gets them immediate satisfaction on something. Doesn't have to be a huge thing, but at least like, hey, we heard you. Early in that process creates that feedback loop of, hey, this is a contractor I can work with. This is somebody who's going to be responsive. When you start the conversation out on that foot, as opposed to, they left a message on a Saturday and you didn't call them back till Thursday, that just really degrades the trust and the value that they imagine you to be bringing to the process. So even just having like simple tools like a podium on your website. Podium's like a kind of a chat bot. Talk to, TAWKTO is another one. I think Talk to even has a free version. There's also a HubSpot version of the chat bot. We utilize a chat bot. And I hesitate even to say chat bot because I do not recommend those tools that are like very bot-like. If you've got a picture of like somebody with a call center, like the
cheesy, like,
the cheesy,
yeah.
I mean,
the stock imagery.
That's, it looks like, Jane in the call center, like that's giving nobody the warm and fuzzies. Like, you want to give them some sort of real feedback. It can be automated, but make it feel as warm and personalized as possible.
So one of those tools you named was Podium.
Yeah.
Is that a free tool, or is that a paid tool, or what's the deal with that one?
Podium is a paid tool. I think Talk to is a free tool, and then we actually use HubSpot's chatbot. I think HubSpot might have a free or like a very inexpensive plan that some of our customers use HubSpot for their CRM, but that's, a couple of things.
Okay.
I mean, even if
but even some basic stuff like, a lot of people get reached out through Instagram DMs or Facebook Messenger. You can set up auto replies for their through your business account. But I like what you said, like basically, I just want to recap here because you nailed a lot of points. I just want to make sure we synthesize this. So one is making sure that the website and the Google My Business, that stuff is aligned in the sense that when people find you, let's say they're searching for a hardscape contractor or a landscape construction company near me, they come across your ad or your listing, you've ranked well on SEO and all that stuff, or on the top 3 on the map locator thing, you're there, they click you. That description, all that stuff seems to align with what they're looking for. They land on your website. On the website, it's more of the stuff they're looking for. It's not completely different, or it's saying different messages, offering different services, whatever, because that's confusion, and confusion breeds this uncertainty, and that uncertainty means that right away they're not trusting you. And you want to build trust gradually. It's like building blocks, pieces of trust, one after the other after the other. So if you can get that stuff aligned, that starts to build that trust. They reach out, no matter what method they use that you have decided is the way that you want people to come into the funnel. Make sure there's a response, because you can't answer the phone all the time, but make sure even if it's as simple as, now this isn't ideal, but even if it's as simple as your voicemail message. If it's just phone calls and you're running a small business, you're running everything off your cell phone, that's cool to get started. But that voicemail should be saying something to set the expectations of A, you do check your messages, B, you do get back to people, but in what time frame? And set that bar so that they don't feel like, I don't know, I took a shot in the dark and I didn't hear back from him within an hour or so. But let's call the next guy. You don't want that to happen, because you did the hard work to get the phone call in the first place, or the text, or the email, or the form submission, or whatever, right?
Yeah. And I mean, there's even, small business phone systems that'll allow you, like I know Grasshopper is one. There's systems that will recognize a missed call and automatically send a text back. So simple stuff like that is, you want to, everybody, that the consumer behavior is, I click a button, I get a thing. Like, that's the way that we are wired. So if you aren't matching that pattern, immediately you're degrading the trust that could be built. It's like you're missing an opportunity there. So anything you can do to click, provide that click a button, I get a thing, even if it's a simple text message. And the other thing I talk about a lot is like, what's the next step, right? Like, what should they expect? Even if you say, hey, and we do this with some of our customers, like, hey, this is our busy time of year. It might take us a couple days to get back to you. That's a real message. Just tell them what to expect. It's better than saying we're going to call you back in 24 hours and missing that, right? So be smart about how you do it. Be human. And that feedback loop for a prospective customer is super important, and only getting more and more important.
Okay. Great. What's next after that?
Yeah.
In building the process.
Just to highlight a little bit of the shift of it, kind of the old school to the new school. I think, we've seen these calendar systems come up. Calendly, you can book me. It's not so, I don't see that one as much in the hardscape industry, but, hey, book a time on my calendar. That for some businesses makes a ton of sense. Even if it's like the 15-minute consult type of thing. I know some people get freaked out about sending out their calendar for somebody else to control, which I totally get that. But, those tools are really helpful as well, because what you can do is, if you can meet people in their, meet a prospective customer in their, match their intensity. So I like the idea of providing a kind of some different options for a homeowner to go through. Maybe it's just, maybe they're top of the funnel. They have like a top of the funnel question, like, hey, do you do this type of work? Or I'm thinking about this type of project. Could you help me think through it? That might be somebody. Or somebody might say, hey, I had an experience with a contractor and it did not go well. I need somebody to help me out ASAP. And it's a nice big project. They just got started and they screwed up, or whatever the case might be. They're hot, right? So you want to provide some ways for them to like really engage with you in a meaningful way to push the ball forward, as opposed to just, more surface level type of question. So in that case, the booking calendar can be really effective because you're kind of mirroring the way that they want to get started. And I think those options, because things are changing so rapidly, creating some options to help homeowners find their own way, kind of like that choose your own adventure type of thing. If you nail it, you're providing them a way to buy the way that they want to buy. And you have to be okay with that process as well. That's very important. And it has to fit the way you want to do things. But the more options that you can get comfortable with, I think the more effective you can be in addressing a large, the kind of the differing versions of the way that people want to interact with contractors.
Yeah, and I think, again, we didn't say this at the outset of this conversation, but ultimately it is a tougher economic situation right now. The market is tougher. So if the market is going to be tougher and we're going to feel the squeeze a little bit, it doesn't mean that the sky is falling. Just we got to adapt our approach here a little bit. One of the ways, coming back to that high five, adding value to the customer, prospective customer, is letting the process or adapting your process to work with their schedule, with their needs, with what they're looking for, because then they feel that they're being served, which is ultimately what you're doing. You do the best service, you get the most payout from it.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, getting people to, I think is an interesting dynamic, 2020, and even before that, hardscape industry has been on a pretty incredible trajectory, right? So the dynamic of the process a couple of years ago where, it's just like, I can't even keep up. And like, you will bend to my will. If you want to come and, if you want me to come and see you, then like, get in line, know, and you could maybe run your process a little bit differently. I think now people have seen things slow down a little bit, although at least from what we hear, the spring's looking
pretty good. Yeah. Spring's looking pretty good, but we'll see. There's still that ominous cloud floating off in the distance. So we don't know what it's going to do to us.
Right. But so right now, you have to be a little bit more accepting of different options. So you don't, cut yourself off and, run a process that's a little too stringent for the economic scenario. So yeah, very good point.
All right. So making it easy for the prospect, having a quick feedback loop, setting some expectations, using calendar tools to allow the customer to select times that make sense for them. What else goes into a good, effective sales process that's adding value to everyone involved?
Yeah. So maybe I'll touch on the kind of the phone process. Because as I mentioned, there's still a lot of that, right? I think there's a couple of elements to a good, whether you're using a call center or have an in-house office manager that answers the phone, or even if you're answering the phone as the a small business owner, because consistency is key. We talk a lot about welcoming them into your process. So the sales questions of like, can I tell you about our process? That is a very powerful way to enter in, to welcome them, a prospective customer, into your process. Asking for permission. Can I tell you about our process? A very friendly question. It's showing them that you have a process. And then you can, whatever your process is from there, explain it. Does that sound okay with you? I think that as an part of that initial conversation, it establishes you as a professional. Can I tell you about the process that we have as a professional business? Likely not something you're hearing from the smaller kind of fly-by-night type of contractors out there.
So quick differentiation. Boom, right away. That's right. I'm in this level of contractors now. So if you want to dance exactly up here, right. Good, we're in the right place.
Yep, exactly. Okay. And
keep going.
You just get to establish yourself as the guide to the process, right? you are walking them down the path that you would like them to go down. Obviously, if they don't want to play ball, that's okay too. You can kind of figure things out from there. But, walking them through here's typically the next step of our process, and then go through here. I like the idea of laying out like, hey, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. At some point, you're going to sign a contract, and then we get working. So as I mentioned, the next step is this. Would it be okay if, then ask them to complete whatever next step it is in the process? So lay out the whole thing, come back to the first one. This is the next step for us. Obviously, you want to do some rapport building and like kind of all that stuff on the way as well. But that's a very strong way to turn that phone conversation to steer them into a process that you feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you want to give them some wiggle room depending on how you want to run your process. But whatever it is, you need to be 100% confident that the way that they're going is going to work for you. You need to have a process and be comfortable with how you work things through, and have a system to track it, obviously, as well. But I think where a lot of people go wrong is they don't stick to the process. Maybe even they have it documented, or one salesperson does it this way and the other one does it this way. And, it's kind of like a basketball team without, everybody's running different plays on offense, or, you got some people playing zone defense and some people may have man-to-man, and, you start to leak in that way, and, you don't have a repeatable type of system that you can track and measure. So whatever the system is, it needs to be consistent across the company, even when it comes to phone and office leads.
I think that's important to drill into a little bit. Like if you do not have a process, or you have a process, but you have a bunch of exceptions to the process, then things are not predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And things become difficult to measure.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say, hypothetically, you have 2 salespeople. They both operate completely differently. You have 100 prospect calls or emails or form submissions or whatever your process is. 100 of those come in and split 50-50. You don't know what you're going to get out the bottom. Whereas if you have a process, the process becomes, I'm not saying that people are not important. People are incredibly important to the execution of a process, and their talents and their abilities are super important to their success. But if they're not following a process, then it's kind of, I don't know if we'll close at 25%, 30%, 40%. That has
Right.
a ripple effect across so many parts of your business. And if you can't measure the steps of the process, you can't measure how many are in step 1, step 2, step 3. What's our close rate when they're from step 1, from step 2, from step 3? You're trapped in the sense that you cannot grow your business beyond a certain size, because you can't add people. You can't add players to the team, because you can only control what is controllable by your direct involvement. So having solid processes are a big key to growing your business and removing yourself from a lot of the steps, so that you can focus on other problem areas that you want to solve to continue the growth and advancement of your company. So it's incredibly important. And making exceptions to the rules that you put in place might be nice, because it's nice. It's easier to get along with people, and it's easier today, but it's probably a type of thing that'll bite you in the you-know-what down the road. Because, like you said, if you have any sports team, basketball, football, hockey, soccer, it doesn't really matter. If every player is allowed to just do whatever the heck they want, sometimes you'll score, sometimes you won't. Will you win? Sometimes. Will you win most of the time? No way to know.
Right.
No way to know. You could have the best players. If they don't know how to work together, it doesn't matter. So this conversation is very important from that perspective. And it is a lot easier. I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, it's a lot easier to make exceptions to processes, because it's the easier conversation to have, and it gets you out of the tough conversation now because you don't have time for it. But you better make time for it sooner rather than later, and not let bad habits form, especially at this time of year, which is crunch time.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting conversation with this too, because if you have a salesperson, you want to allow some, and this is true again from my experience and the software side of things, right? We have a sales motion, and you want to allow for some skill, right? For some personal skill from an individual contributor, but it needs to be within the guide rails of your process. So, creating a completely robotic like system, I think that's, these aren't androids out there doing the sales appointments, right? So like everybody's got a different flavor, but you have to, as a leader and a business owner, put those guardrails up and have mature conversations with a talented salesperson who may want to step out of line, and it's like, hey, well, here's why we are doing it this way. And, having those guardrails and allowing for a bit of creativity inside of them, I think is also important. But there's like there's maybe like a bit of a mountain to climb. For most businesses don't have a process in general, right? So you got to climb that mountain first before you start to allow for the variability, because if you don't have that process to define, then, it's all variability. So I think it's important, most businesses need to focus on developing a process that works, and then, working with the team to make sure that they're smartly and appropriately using their skills to get things moving forward, but within the guidelines of the process.
This episode is brought to you by Hardscaper.com. The Hardscaper mission is to empower industry professionals with the skills, inspiration, and confidence they need to take their businesses to new heights. Struggling with training programs for your team? Looking for helpful tips to build a better company? Subscribe today to gain access to hours of interactive, on-demand Hardscape construction and business courses for free. Check out Hardscaper.com.
So, talked about some of the basics of setting up a process, and this is pretty, I like the way you put it. Like, there's a mountain to climb. If you don't have any of these things in place, this is a lot of work. But they are small steps that make a big impact.
Yeah.
The stuff we've covered so far. You talked about one of the common mistakes, which is not sticking to a process or allowing for too much flexibility within a process. Are there any other common sales mistakes that you see that go counter to that customer centricity that we're kind of talking about, building a buying process and molding your sales process to it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've seen every once in a while, which again is kind of like come out of fashion a bit as things slow down, is everybody got a bit obsessed with like their pre-qual process.
Because the demand was just through the roof. It's not everyone's calling.
So I've seen examples of this that are just so off-putting to anybody who's not person who designed the form or the process or whatever. If you put some examples, or, a PDF, hey, we're going to send you this PDF, and it's an interactive PDF you got to open from your email, which nobody wants to do. That's just like, you're just losing people at every step, that step alone, and then click through these things, and there's a bunch of information you don't understand, and, technical terms that homeowners might not understand. Some homeowners don't even know what a retaining wall is. Like, I think very often we get into these situations where, the technical terms are like maybe a little bit, more prevalent in the process than not, or than they should be. So I've seen some examples of those like big, onerous type of tools that give you some good information, but maybe the output and the benefit to the homeowner aren't as clear. I think that's maybe an overarching thing that I could, aside from just like onerous forms. I think maybe it's just like, could be simply said as like, it's not customer, non-customer centric types of processes. But I think asking the question of like, what do you want the homeowner or the end customer to feel at the end of every step? And if it's not a what's in it for me type of like aha moment, like, oh, I see why I'm doing this. Like, this is, no brainer. I'm moving the ball forward. Putting yourself in those shoes, like literally writing it out, like, here's the step in the process. Like, what should the homeowner feel at that point?
Mm-hmm.
What do they understand to be the case? Like, writing it out as if like literally, put your different hat on, change your mindset to say like, here's what I would want a homeowner to feel at this step in the process. I think is a pretty interesting exercise to make sure that you're aligned with the way that who you want the homeowner to feel.
Right. So would a good example be just taking, like you said, most homeowners don't even know what a retaining wall is, which is true. They know walls. They don't know it's called a retaining wall. They don't understand what it actually does. They just want more flat land to put a backyard in, right?
Right.
So would an example be that, as part of the pre-qualification, you're asking them to either send you photos of the backyard or to give you a measurement of the highest point versus the lowest point, but just saying that isn't enough because you're not asking yourself what's in it for me if I'm in the customer's shoes, but maybe prefacing that instruction, that step of the process by saying, for one of the main things that we need to establish in order to correctly assess whether or not this project is a fit for us or whether we can execute the project properly is to understand the need for retaining structures. These help us flatten out the land to create more usable space. To do that, we need a picture and we need to know the highest point of the backyard and the lowest point of the backyard. That helps us a lot in the planning process. Is that an example of just like a simple thing that you can say that helps the homeowner know, like, oh yeah, well, I totally get that. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yep. Yeah. And I think going one step further, some of what we talk about on the Groundwork side of things is like, we want to make sure that we assign the right designer to your project.
Okay.
Like that's a very tangible thing. Like, oh, I do want the right designer for my project.
Okay. Yeah.
I should probably do this, right?
Probably a better explanation than the one I gave. That's a good example.
Yeah. It's less technical, right? Like, and it's like, it's the psychology of somebody at like the top end of the sales funnel. It's like, oh yeah, I'm excited. Like, what am I excited about? Like, I'm excited about getting a design. I'm excited about more time with my family. I'm excited about getting this thing going because my wife asked me to, call somebody about this thing or whatever.
Last month.
Last month. And I got to figure it out. I got to match the time frame of me working with this contractor with the time frame that she has in mind of when it should have happened. And, so like, quick, easy. That's the way we talk about our product is like,
I like it.
Quick. Like, hey, this is the quickest way for you to get started with us is to do these things. Right. So it's a little bit, it's a creative process. And I think at certain different points in the sales funnel, like as they're progressing down towards the, from like high level awareness to more of a buying side of things, that changes, right? Like that emotional side of things and what the homeowner wants to get out of the process, what they're expecting changes a little bit. But, initially it's just like, hey, I want to get started quick. Like that's generally what people care about.
Okay. Let's shift quickly to Onsite. We've talked about a lot of the other stuff that leads up to the meeting. What are some good things to keep in mind when you move to that first Onsite visit to make sure that the experience is as top notch as you can possibly offer?
Yeah, I think one of the other big things that we talk about is a show me, you know me type of thing.
Okay.
This goes for really a lot of the aspects of the sales process, but if you're able to build rapport, if you're able to understand the site conditions, what they're looking for, start to collect some of their vision and like their emotional attachment to the project, man, you're in a really good spot to have a solid in-person consultation, right? I think the days of, if you imagine a couple of contractors, let's say contractor 1 and contractor 2 go over there and they ask the homeowner, they show up, knock on the door, and they're like, hey, what can I help you with? It's like, oh, well, okay. Here's what I was hoping, versus somebody going in and saying, hey, Mrs. Smith, thanks so much for sharing all that project information, and doing that quick phone call really helped us out. We got to see your space from the information that you sent us. Would love to just I've got a good idea of where we're going with this thing. Here's the way I see this conversation happening today. I want to take some measurements, share some ideas with you, and then that'll give us enough information to put together a design. And, hopefully by the end of that, whatever the process is, I know there's some design consultations that some contractors
all that
run
other
for,
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. However that goes. But the idea of starting that in-person conversation from a point of already have gone familiarity, it's just building a human connection. You're the trusted guide. You become like the old friend a little bit more of the old friend coming over to help you out with a thing. That is a much more appropriate situation for the time and effort of a sales appointment in person than, hey, what could I maybe help you with?
Yeah. Well, it kind of ties into, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of the common story arc. Most books, most movies are built on this story arc where there's a hero faces a problem. They meet a guide. The guide shows them the way, and then they're called to action. They have a decision to make. And, a good sales process, a good marketing process, and a good sales process, but we're talking about sales today. That good sales process is probably going to follow that story arc, and you're saying a lot of the same things. You're not putting yourself at the center of the action or the narrative. The customer is, and the customer has a problem. They need to do something about their outdoor space, so they're looking for a guide. They find the guide. It's you. You show them the way. You show them all the great things that can be achieved and how it can happen and how they can be the hero of their story, transforming the outdoor space, making sure that they have an awesome home for their family to grow up in. And now they have a decision to make. That decision is, do they sign with you? Do they put it off? Or do they sign with somebody else? But that's how every great story in the history of storytelling has gone. So I think that customer centricity aspect is really critical, and understanding that you're not the hero, you're the guide. And as long as you act as always the guide, and the guide is acting in the best interest of the customer, you're going to do well.
Yeah. And I think the sooner you become that guide, rather the sooner that the damsel in distress or whatever meets their hero, and the person that's going to help them along the path, the sooner you are that person, the better, right? That's the magic of a little bit of the newer school way of selling is hey, everybody wins, right? You get the job done quicker. Everybody realizes their, nirvana state a little bit earlier, as opposed to, a meeting and then another phone call and then, emailed over, it's just, I think there's the beauty of some of the stuff that we've seen out there is that, it's an alignment, right? Everybody wins when you kind of think about things a little bit differently, given all the backdrop of the way that people want to buy.
I like it. All right. So Jeff, real quick, how does Groundwork help with all this stuff?
Well, pretty darn integrated, honestly. I love talking about this stuff. Just from a theoretical perspective, it's super fun. And, we've been lucky enough to put together some tech from a sales process standpoint. I hesitate, the virtual sales is a very loaded word, right? But I think that digital connection that we've been talking a lot about today is what our product really shines at doing. And a lot of it is focused on getting video project walkthroughs from homeowners ahead of a sales appointment. So for simple projects, we see contractors that are able to put together, some pricing guides for, maybe even fully price a simple enhancement project. But lots of times it's a part of the new school sales process. We were talking a bit today about really developing a kind of a virtual first or digital relationship between a contractor and a homeowner, and our software is, white labeled for the contractors. We're pretty high on that. Like, part of our job is to make you look like a pro, differentiate yourself, and help you realize and leverage technology so that you can put forth a process that is customer centric and is very, with quick feedback loops and, a lot of the things that we talked about today. And a lot of it's done through video collaboration. We've got, some text messaging stuff in there as well. And we integrate with other systems like, Synced Up and Element and some other systems out there that, you might use for pricing. Think of us as kind of like that middle sales process layer for this like shift to a little bit more digital, native type of collaboration on the front end of a project.
So basically enhancing the process, or becoming a critical part of the process that makes the customer feel heard, puts them in the driver's seat in terms of the interaction with you, or makes them feel that they are. But ultimately, you're both steering, and ultimately that's a great partnership, and that's what gives great results, and that's always what you want in business. But I think like what I like with the tool that you've built on the video side of things, like you're talking about the show me you know me, that feeling that you want the homeowner to have when the contractor knocks at the door. I mean, it's kind of tough to beat that when and the system is built like it. Sure, I could ask a homeowner to text me some pictures and some videos, but having it built into a process in a system embedded on my website, so it's not just like they go through the website and then they go into this other world, which is the SMS or the text world, and you're lost in a sea of text messages coming in from left, right, and center. This really keeps them part of that process, and then tying into things like Synced Up or LMN, which they're great for pricing, but they're also customer relationship management tools. They're CRMs, which is important when you want to grow your business and you have a lot of leads coming in, and how many of them turn into actual customers. And of those actual customers, how much return business you want to get out of them, and so on. You need to have these tools. But before you have the tools, you need the processes. And that's why we spent so much time talking about that first today.
Yep. Yeah. And, we, one thing I'll mention too is we've worked very, very hard to build personalization into the system. So even though, you might think of like a virtual sales process as like, hey, I'll intake this information. There's like a table to price it real quick and like chunk out a thing. Yeah. Chunk out a price. Like it's so far away from that.
This isn't a cold, here's our pricing structure. Here's this makes this is the opposite of that.
That's right. Yeah. And so tactically what we've done is, we allow contractors to embed video as a part of the process. So literally it's, hey, I'm Alex, I'm the owner of XYZ Hardscapers. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this for us. So like the homeowner sees you in the process, and like it's a very warm type of thing. But the end result again is like it's just everybody marching kind of in the same direction of we're trying to get information. The easiest way for us to get information is it makes it easier for you, the homeowner. It makes it easier for the contractor. Let's just like collaborate virtually for a little bit, and then we'll take it from there based on the information we share. So video has like been a very interesting tool to work with because it's in many, many ways like a great equalizer. You can see, you can sense, you can get a lot of stuff, get a lot of that like project and like even the intangible stuff about a project, seeing the space. Hearing the voice, the tonality from a homeowners or explaining their project, it's been super interesting, and we're continuing to build and innovate, and it'll be fun to see where the product is from a technology perspective in a year or so. But it's been a fun ride, and hardscaping has just been a really cool space to be in. We're in some other industries too, but hardscaping is our largest customer set, and it's kind of like, as I mentioned, is as, had a shovel and, lawnmower and the whole bit like back in the day. So it's fun to be a part of the industry for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely an industry that, I say this all the time, but we're just scratching the surface of the potential that we can realize, and tools like this are one of the ways that we can really take that big step forward.
Totally.
So I'm very excited about where the future is taking us, and very glad to have had you on the show. Let's wrap up here. I have some notes. You tell me if I'm wrong, but main keys here to building a good process. Think about it first, that you need to have a process, because the process is what yields the measurable results that then can turn into something that you can massage, you can refine, and that gives you good predictable results. And that's how you build a business, because then the business runs. You're not running it, it's running, and you operate at the top. Consistency, meaning that process is consistently applied. It's clear, it's understood by everyone. Everyone can follow along. The homeowner understands, the salesperson or designer or yourself, whoever's involved on the other end, understands, and everyone knows what's coming up next and what's coming up next and what's coming up next. And it's very customer centric. You're like I said before, and like you said specifically, the buying process and orienting yourself around the buyer and being the guide for that buyer to achieve the outdoor living space that they're desiring. That's the goal, not the sale. Helping them get what they want is the goal. The byproduct is a sale. And ultimately, if you operate that way, I think you'll achieve great things. Did I miss anything?
No, but I will add in one element. I think sometimes I imagine somebody listening to this and saying, hey, when do I have the time to like bake this whole cake?
Okay. Yeah.
So one thing that I have seen is as I've worked with tons and tons of contractors, is, there's one in particular I recently had a conversation with, and sometimes these transformations take a good chunk of time, right? And bite-sizing a process often makes sense. So writing out maybe the ideal scenario at a high level, but then working on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, or maybe it's seasonal. Like, hey, we're going to improve this aspect this year. I think that giving business owners license to do that often makes a ton of sense, right? You can't boil the ocean. Pick out, it could be the pain point, or it could be the biggest pain point in your sales process. It could be what might be easiest to implement, quickest win. Whatever you sense as a business owner is the right chunk to take on, go for it. Don't get paralyzed by the boiling the ocean type of scenario. Yeah. Just get something done. It's incremental improvements that really move forward. And I see that often with, even in technology, kind of makes it is sometimes challenging with this too, right? You buy into a new system, it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to take a year to get going. And, some systems are like that. Some systems are easier to implement. But do something, work on something. And one other tip I'll give you, anybody listening, there's a lot of talk about standard operating procedures. We call our sales process a sales playbook, and it's pretty darn simple. You can do it in a Google Doc. Just, high level, outline a process, maybe what it is now, maybe a little bit of what you want it to be. And then that might give you the structure to really dive into a segment of that to work on in the near term.
Mm-hmm. I love both those tips. Think about what you want in the end. Don't worry about how you're going to get there yet. What do you want? Then what are the biggest chunks? What are the biggest needle movers that you would need to achieve? And just do one at a time.
Yep.
Rome wasn't built in a day. Great businesses are never done. They're always evolving. They're always improving. And that comes back to your key of consistency. You don't need to implement a full overhauled process tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
But you improve 1% every day or every week or every month, every quarter, every year. It doesn't matter. It's just by the end, you're going to get there and you're going to be better than you were yesterday. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do with the show, is help everyone get better than yesterday, just a little bit at a time. There's a long road ahead, and we can all win. There's more than enough market space out there for everyone. There's more than enough opportunity for everyone. And there's more than enough racetrack ahead for all of us to start making those little changes one step at a time and getting there to where we want to be. But you got to stop and think, what is it that I want? Otherwise, your compass doesn't know where north is.
Yep. Love it.
Awesome. Jeff, what's the best way for people to reach you or to learn more about Groundwork?
Yeah, probably the best way is to hit up our website. Hellogroundwork.com is the website. And we're all over LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram as well. Those handles are just at Hello Groundwork. So give us a follow. Yeah, would love to connect with anybody that is interested in what we do. Even if we can be helpful from a sales process standpoint, hit me up, shoot me a LinkedIn message or, on the Instagram channel or whatever. Let's connect. We like connecting with people and being helpful, even if it's not just from a software perspective. We'd love to get in touch with anybody who finds this episode interesting, or if you've done something that you think would be helpful for us to include. We love to just, that's part of my job is collaborating, listening, collaborating, and hopefully building effective software to help contractors get better with their sales.
Fantastic. Jeff, this has been a lot of fun. I like to do my count of pages of notes. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of notes for this one. I'm a sales guy at heart, so I always like talking about sales. But thank you very much for joining us on the show. And until next time, everyone, work hard, pave harder. We'll see you next week on the Hardscape Growth Show. You've been listening to Hardscape Growth, a podcast for hungry professionals who want to grow their businesses and level up. Each episode is all about taking the next step in running your business, so make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on your favorite podcast player. And if you're finding this information to be useful, help others in your position discover us by giving us a star rating and leaving a comment. We'll see you next week.